Okay, so the following is what I would describe as a cumulative critical meditation about my own generative process that was inspired and articulated or given articulation in part by notes and journals from my first quarter of PhD seminar class time, which was the fall, and my very moderately successful attempts to maintain a journal of my conscious writing habits. And Della Pollock's 6 excursions into performative writing from her article, Performing Writing. So I've chosen to add them and add responses to this piece because I don't know, they've been a very thoughtful meditation on, I think, not knowing what I'm doing and being okay with that being the point. First, I started with some notes. Is my writing performative? Yes. Here's why. My writing is conversational. My writing is always in my voice unless it needs to directly represent someone else's. My writing is structured according to my thinking. My thinking shows through in the way I punctuate, in my use of space, in my choice of words. My writing is self-conscious. It always assumes an audience and it's clear. My writing is deliberate without being prescriptive. I say what I mean, but do not assume a reading audience will agree or correspond to the way I express an opinion or idea, or with the opinions or ideas themselves. My writing is an extension of my conversational self. My writing uses repetitive rhetorical figures. My writing is a skeleton before it is a body. My writing has gotten more direct in language, but more diffuse in style over time. I am identifiable in, by, and through the performativity of my writing. What am I performing? What am I expecting? Della says performative writing is evocative, described as an intimate co-performance of language and experience, to which I respond, performative writing is inviting, by which I mean it is initiatory. It brings a reader or a watcher into an atmosphere engineered by your own specific language and experience. Whether that environment is suitable to them is up to their own experiences, including that of knowing your writing. It is, however, a door, a gateway, a liminal bridge, as my undergrad theory professor might say, into our own brand of performativity. It is an exchange of critical and experiential thought made tangible by this crude but familiar conveyance of representation. Performative writing is generous. It presents things from you, of you, to others. It is offered, exchanged, attended to, and sometimes taken up and repeated, upcycled, interrogated, updated by others. Interest and thought is generous when there is no expectation about how it's received or interpreted, or I suppose more accurately, if the expectation is flexible. Performative writing is a giving act. Performative writing is conspiratorial. Part of the inviting nature of performative writing is that you are offering an opportunity for someone to agree with you or just to take up something that you offer. Whether someone agrees with you or not, their interest in your writing and their reactions to it puts them in coordination with your work. They know something about you through your work, and by the act of engagement, however it's made, they are doing the same for themselves. Performative writing is playful. Something done with care, with attention, with a wealth of diligent experience, with careful structure, with conscious effort, but without the guarantee of being understood, that's risk. And effort and risk combined is a gamble. And gambling is a game of chance. It's strategic, it's making a play, it's deft. Care without preciousness is playful. Della says performative writing is metonymic, described as opening language to what it is not and can never be, to which I respond. Performative writing is representational. It can exist in many forms and have many intended outcomes. Are you writing a score, a speech, a presentation, a set of exercises, a script? These all come with their own assumptions of action that can be followed or subverted. They are all repeatable, but not recreatable. They can potentially exist in multiple states and forms of presentation and performability. Works and actions are both representable and representative. Performative writing is flexible. Performativity, writing included, can present what it is, but can also remind one of its limitations and absences. Going in between absence and presence requires both critical flexibility and the flexibility that the recognition of limitation of absence can bring. Performative writing is iridescent. You might see, hear, experience, sense something completely different depending on the angle of your experiential perspective. And I am including the writer, creator, the doer, and the receiver in this category. Della says performative writing is subjective, subjects the reader to the writer's reflexivity. I respond, performative writing has mass and texture. Performative writing is on display as something because it represents something, whether those things or that thing be conceptual, presentational, actionable, anything in between, or something else entirely. It occupies space in a tangible way. It has volume, and it is feelable, it is sensible. It is experiential in a way other than merely critical. Performative writing is earnest. In general, performative writing is something that, however presented, is done so in good faith. Performative writing is objectifiable because performative writing is something and it can be engaged with in a variety of potential ways, including those not originally done or acted upon or intended by its originator or originators. It can be viewed, heard, sensed, experienced as its own entity by whichever subject is engaging with it. It becomes object to subject. Della says performative writing is nervous. Genealogy writes a body already written by history. I respond, performative writing is striated. It is structured, built, layered, and stacked by layers of context. The layers are different depending on who is experiencing something and perceiving it, but the action therein might just add another layer to structure. Performative writing has give and stretch. We already talked about this kind of writing being flexible. That's another aspect of flexibility and absence as well, I suppose. Performative writing can fill gaps of action, perception, engagement, context. It can exist merely in itself, a product by a person taking up space while on earth. It can be molded by active engagement, recreated in another image, or transferred into another vessel of performativity or context. It fits and fills holes, it has holes, it amasses, weaves, and connects to make holes. Performative writing is self-aware. It has an identifiable author. Whether you know them or not, you can identify them by the thing they've done. You think about them probably even in the abstract when you account for the content of the work and its execution, even if the creator or originator is not directly involved in whatever the making is. Do we do the same with non-performative writing? Perhaps we certainly may. It is not, however, a given in my mind and experience, like the corner. Performative writing is self-stacking. This is similar to striation, but I refer to self-stacking as a conscious act, whereas striation might be more organic or unintentional, like the functioning of a healthy nervous system in a given body. Let's call this the conscious making of a layer, and striation, the natural reaction, generational contexts of performativity. And that's also kind of a neat segue into the next category. Della says performative writing is citational. Citational writing figures writing as rewriting, to which I respond. Performative writing is vortices of reference, of context, of history. Performative writing must consciously include. Likewise, performative writing ultimately suffers from absences of an inclusion. It can and does consciously and unconsciously exclude. Those who experience this kind of writing feel and question absences as they feel and question the trails left by the inclusion of so many accumulated voices. Performative writing acknowledges the marginal. It can include and offer an encyclopedic amount of information about the how of an idea, but by likewise acknowledging gaps and erasures in that encyclopedic knowledge, it can also acknowledge and begin to amend and amass knowledge of, by, and for the marginalized, those who have been consciously and unconsciously excluded from earlier collections of knowledge. Performative writing is gracious. It is not static. By being flexible, by having give in its delivery, intent or intention, meaning, audience, performativity, methodology, it can and must make necessary space for new and important contexts. Performative writing is directly indirect. It can provide a variety of texts, contexts, concepts, methods, ideologies, name it, from which a spectator or experiencer might choose to engage with it. But even when and if the ideas presented in a piece of performative writing are singular or represent one direct thought process, opinion, etc., there are generally other references to research and investigate and other opinions to be formed out of that single piece, or the thought itself can be abstracted. Finally, Bella says, performative writing is consequential. The realities performative rhetorics present assume negotiation, to which I respond quietly. Performative writing is inevitable. We think, therefore we are. We do, therefore we. Performative writing is demanding. Anytime you consider something critically, you are probably taxing and testing yourself on some level. By including others and their thoughts and actions in your critical conversations, you are taxing and testing them as well. Good. Interrogation requires research, and research commands and demands a lot of the best you can give. So does the act of doing, of making, of offering your own thoughts up for critical engagement from others. So does generous collaboration. So does allowing your critical opinions to be flexible in the face of new ideas and information. So what? Well, I'll say this. I know what kind of practitioner I am, but how do I want or need or hope to engage with my critical and embodied practices as a researcher and a writer and a person within this new academic framework? While Pollock frames her fourth excursion as the nervous of a nervous system, I somewhat tenuously identify the current state of my performative writing with the endocrine system. My performative writing is hormonal. There is an uncertain but inevitable development, a redistribution of energy, a reallocation of priorities going on within my writing right now. This process made me reluctant to rely on old habits, even the ones that have served me in good stead, and try things I've never done in untried ways. My writing self oscillates between confidence and awkwardness, between bursts of energy and lethargic growing pains, insatiability and bashfulness. It is likely a personal reflection of my own inner development and a representation of changing external circumstances. What is it, after all?